Chosen one, your footsteps may be silent, but your arrival is never unnoticed. You walk into a room and the air shifts, not because of performance, noise, or arrogance, but because your essence carries the kind of gravity only forged through self-awareness. There is no announcement, no need to raise your voice or take up space unnaturally. You simply are, and that alone demands attention. This isn't something you learned, it is something you uncovered, something that was always there beneath the layers the world tried to wrap you in. You do not enter with answers. You arrive with a peace that asks the right questions of those around you. The women who cross your path feel it instantly. They can't always describe it, but it's there. That deep calm, that unshakable center, that invitation to breathe more fully just by standing near you. Not because you are trying to impress them, but because you have stopped running from who you are. The most powerful kind of attraction does not beg. It reminds. And you, chosen one, remind others of stillness they forgot existed. You've outgrown the need to be liked. That is why you are respected. You've moved past the shallow chase of validation. That is why you are remembered. And now your presence does something rare. It causes others to reflect, not just react. You don't just pass through a place, you alter its tempo. You don't just meet people, you awaken something buried within them. That is not charm. That is not game. That is the residue of divine presence learned in private and carried in silence. You once wondered why people seemed stirred or stunned in your company, why they softened their voice when you listened, why their guard dropped, even without your asking. It wasn't a trick. It wasn't manipulation. It was the fact that you were fully present, and presence is so rare, it feels like magic to the ones who live half asleep. You have made peace your home. And peace is now what people feel when you are near. That is why they lean in when you say very little. That is why they remember your silence more than other speeches. You have become the message they didn't know they needed to hear. Chosen one, in a culture addicted to noise, your quiet is thunder. You don't speak to dominate. You speak when necessary, and when you do, it lands. Not because you are trying to be deep, but because everything you say comes from a place of internal stillness. The room doesn't hush because you force it to. It settles because you embody the thing people have been chasing. Alignment. You are no longer pulled in 1,000 directions, trying to prove or perform. You have collapsed those illusions into stillness, and stillness has made you unstoppable. Stillness isn't passive, it is power disciplined into silence. It is fire that has learned patience. It is the sword unsheathed only when the time is right. That's why your energy affects people before you even speak. You've taken the time to build clarity in private, and now that clarity speaks without volume. Women feel it around you. Not danger, but safety. Not desperation, but definition. You do not need to be loud, flashy, or clever, because your grounded presence is the one thing people can't fake or ignore. You are not trying to take the spotlight. You are the ground others find themselves standing on when the chaos fades. People trust what is unmoved, and you, chosen one, have become a man unmoved, not because you are cold, but because you are centered. That centering isn't confidence built on compliments or results. It's confidence that was forged in dark nights, in lonely disciplines, in the sacred practice of becoming whole when no one was watching. That's why your calm unnerves some and comforts others. It is the mirror of where they are and where they are not. You don't need to prove anything anymore. You have already proven to yourself that you are worthy. The room notices because the room feels it. Women who never knew what security felt like recognize it not in your words, but in the way your presence makes their nervous system breathe. And men who have only experienced dominance through volume feel something unfamiliar, the humbling, honorable pressure of true peace. You are not here to impress, you are here to anchor. And when the wind rises, as it always does, it is your stillness that becomes the lighthouse. Let the world talk. Let it spin in its noise and chase. You know who you are, and that knowing is why others listen when you finally speak. Chosen one, you have become a paradox that only the spirit can decode. You radiate approachability without ever compromising your sovereignty. There is warmth in your eyes, but not a single opening for entitlement. Your heart has not grown cold, but it has grown guarded by wisdom, and that distinction is the gateway into your rare presence. You are not trying to be mysterious. You are simply no longer leaking energy to be understood. Women feel the difference. There is no game in your gaze, no hunger to be needed. Yet there is invitation, there is grounding. There is that quiet understanding that if someone is allowed near, it is because they were called, not because they conquered. You do not withhold love, you reveal it with discernment. And this shift has made you magnetic in ways you never expected. Your yes is powerful now because your no has become sacred. You are not closed. You are intentional. You are not hiding. You are guarding the garden of your peace, and not everyone gets a key. When people meet you, they often don't understand why they feel both pulled and hesitant. The truth is, they're standing in front of a man who knows his worth. That unsettles the insecure and awakens the sleeping. The more you grew into this knowing, the less you needed to explain it. And now, even your silence says, this is earned, not bought. This is real, not rehearsed. This is sacred ground, not a stage. People mistake availability for openness. But you, chosen one, have learned the divine difference. You can be kind without being consumed. You can be generous without becoming drained. And this is the line most never cross. The moment a man realizes he is not here to please, but to embody. The ones who know your energy feel it like calm thunder, like a sanctuary wrapped in skin. They are not drawn to you because you're loud. They are drawn to you because you are rooted. And that kind of rootedness cannot be seduced. It must be met. Let them guess what you're thinking. Let them wonder why you're at peace in a world of constant motion. Let them feel safe, intrigued, and slightly disarmed. That is not manipulation. That is the natural result of a man who has mastered his boundaries and forgiven his past. You are safe to approach, yes, but untouchable to anything that does not honor you. That is why they look. That is why they pause, and that is why your energy walks 3 steps ahead of you into every room. There was a time, chosen one, when your value felt like a flame that needed constant feeding. You adjusted, adapted, and shifted just to fit into rooms that could not contain your spirit. You entertained, you over-explained, and still felt unseen. But the cost was too high, and your soul finally called it to an end. That day changed everything. That was the day the actor stepped off the stage and the man returned to himself. You stopped performing. Not out of rebellion, but out of realization. You were never created to audition. You were formed to embody. And embodiment needs no applause. You discovered the art of showing up as you are. Unpolished when raw, refined when focused, silent when still. You saw the world try to dress up their emptiness in glitter, and you let it pass by. You walked away from the applause of strangers to listen for the approval of God. You burned the costume, you dismantled the script, and you looked at yourself in the mirror without a mask for the first time in years. Now, your presence is not a highlight reel. It is a wholeness manifest. You're not trying to be noticed. You are living noticed. You're not forcing alignment. You are alignment. Women recognize it not because of your words, but because of your still energy, your grounded posture, your calm refusal to prove yourself. You're no longer entertaining people who want a performance. You're inviting people who want the truth, and this has shifted everything. Your confidence is no longer a reaction, it is a decision. You are not waiting to be chosen. You are the choosing. And when someone cannot feel your worth, you don't argue with them. You walk away, not in pride, but in peace. The performer needs the crowd, but you have become the man who walks with purpose even when no one is watching. That is why the right people begin to gather. That is why the right woman sees you and says, I feel safe here. I feel inspired here. I feel home here. Because chosen one, you have become your true self, and your true self was never born to perform. Chosen one, the greatest miracle is not that you were gifted power, but that you learned how not to misuse it. That is why your presence heals. That is why your steps feel safe. Because what women and men sense around you is the echo of someone who could conquer, yet chooses to protect. You don't prove your strength through intimidation. You prove it through the absence of harm. There is a depth in your eyes that speaks of battles won, not by dominance, but by discipline. You are not passive, you are anchored. And in a world that has misunderstood masculinity as either aggression or avoidance, you stand as the third way. Presence, not performance, not bravado, not hiding. You're simply there. And when you walk into a room, people don't feel their walls go up, they feel their breath return. Because your masculine essence is not a flame that burns. It is a hearth that warms. It invites, it calms, it protects. This didn't come by accident. You had to bleed for it. You had to sit with the wreckage of your own decisions and say, no more. You had to unlearn the noise of boys pretending to be men. You had to remember your father's voice within you, calm, clear, still. And now, you no longer dominate the moment. You hold it. You cradle it. You lead not with command, but with certainty. And the feminine around you feels it. Not because you are loud, but because you are rooted. The storm in you has become a river. The fire in you has learned to warm, not burn. Your voice doesn't raise to be heard, it lowers to restore safety. And that, chosen one, is why you are irresistible to the healed woman and unsettling to the broken one. You reflect what they thought could not exist anymore. A man who can, but does not destroy. There is a deep sigh that leaves the body of anyone who stands close to you. It is not because you said the right thing. It is because your spirit said, you are safe now. That is what you've become, chosen one. A sacred storm turned sanctuary. A place where no masks are needed, where healing happens just by your presence. You didn't chase the title, you didn't demand the crown, you simply refused to betray your soul, and that alone made you rise. Chosen one, there is something rare about you now. Not because you asked for it, but because you carried it through fire. The world tried to define you by loudness, by money, by conquest, but you knew better. You knew that the most valuable man is not the one everyone sees. It's the one who sees clearly. And so, you stayed true. You walked alone for seasons others couldn't bear. You sat in silence while the world begged for attention. You chose depth over popularity, patience over impulse, truth over acceptance. And slowly the air around you changed. You stopped seeking the room that would validate you. You became the room. You became the space where clarity walks in, where integrity breathes, where character is non-negotiable. Now others try to measure themselves by you, but they don't know the weight you carried to become this steady. They don't know the nights you almost crumbled, the prayers you whispered when no one could see, the promises you made to your future self when the old self begged for compromise. They don't know, but they feel it, and so they adjust in your presence, not out of fear, but out of respect. Women no longer wonder if men like you exist. They recognize that you've always been becoming, and now without asking to be chosen, you have become the one they choose to mirror their peace. You have become the man whose words do not flatter but land, whose touch doesn't take but steadies, whose energy speaks the language of remembrance, not performance. You didn't campaign to be seen. You didn't write slogans on your chest. You simply embodied what cannot be taught, the standard that only heaven can set. And now the world notices. Now the world pauses. And you, chosen one, walk ahead, not to impress, but to lead by example. You are not louder, you are clearer. You are not richer, you are wiser. You are not trendy, you are timeless. And that is why you have become the reference point others now measure their integrity against. You did not beg to be the standard. You simply chose never to abandon your divine alignment. And that was more than enough. Chosen one, there is something unteachable in the way you move now. It is not arrogance. It is not even pride. It is something quieter, more sacred, a rhythm born from wholeness. You walk like a man who has already seen what the world offers and made peace with not needing it. You don't move to impress. You don't hurry to chase. Your footsteps echo the sound of a man who has become his own home. There was a time when you scrambled, when you looked to others for permission, for applause, for belonging. That time is over. You do not walk ahead to be seen. You walk with alignment, and that, without trying, turns heads. The path you walk now is not a sprint. It's a vibration, a current others can feel when you pass. Not because you try to be magnetic, but because you walk with the kind of certainty that makes the uncertain pause. And your wholeness is not loud, it is felt. It is seen in how you no longer fumble your words when silence could say more. It is in how you sit with tension without rushing to resolve it. It is in how you look at people, not to consume them, but to understand them. Your walk is the silent sermon of a man who knows that peace is not in possessions, not in conquest, but in complete alignment with self and source. Your pace is different. It isn't dictated by fear of missing out. You don't chase trends, you don't react to chaos, you don't scramble when others panic. You move differently. Because you no longer walk toward validation, you walk with revelation. Every step is chosen, not out of fear, but from deep remembering. And that is why even the ground beneath you responds differently. The energy around you bends to your steps. Others don't know how to explain it, but they feel it. You are no longer one of many. You are now the man who shifts the air without raising a hand. And women, especially women anchored in their own femininity, feel safest in your steps. Not because you chase, but because your walk invites, and in that invitation is freedom. Not control, not expectation. Just a sacred rhythm that says, I have nothing to prove and everything to protect. And so your wholeness speaks, even when your mouth is closed. It whispers in the quiet, this is a man who has already returned to himself. And in a world chasing echoes, you are now the origin. Chosen one, the most dangerous man is not the one who knows how to speak, but the one who knows how to resonate. You do not attract from tactics. You do not seduce with masks. What draws others to you now is the undeniable weight of your inner stillness. You have stopped asking, what do they want me to be? And in its place you remembered, who did God make me to become? It's that remembrance, not performance, that makes you magnetic. You no longer move with desperation. You are no longer available to energy that asks you to shrink. Because the core of you has remembered its shape and you refuse to bend for counterfeit love. You attract not because of strategy, but because your alignment is louder than any pitch. The right people feel it, the wrong ones fear it. But all of them notice it. You used to lead with your wounds, and the world fed on your hunger. But now, you lead with wholeness, and it repels what cannot honor you. The people who come close now are not pulled in by your appearance, but by your clarity. They are not enchanted by your charm. They are convicted by your calm. You don't need to chase. You don't need to convince. You sit in your power, and the right ones come. Not because you summoned them, but because you match what they've prayed for but never found. Your energy no longer leaks from over-explaining, over-giving, or over-performing. It holds, it centers, it pulls, and it only does so because you have chosen truth over temptation. Your ego no longer drives the engine. It surrendered the wheel to your purpose, and now are the type of man whose very presence filters the room. You don't walk in and wonder if you belong, and so, your energy does the sorting for you. You attract differently now. Not because you've changed your style, but because you no longer compromise your soul for a seat at the table. You became the table. You became the stillness in a world addicted to noise. And that is why people linger in your presence longer than they planned, because they feel something they forgot existed. A man who has remembered himself. This isn't ego. This is elevation. This isn't seduction. This is spiritual signature. This is what happens when a man aligns with heaven, walks in discipline, and chooses peace over popularity. You are not flashy, but you are unforgettable. Because your energy no longer pulls people into performance, it calls them back to truth. You do not attract because you seek. You attract because you see. And what you now see, chosen one, is that you were never meant to blend. You were always meant to become the compass others use to find their direction home. Chosen one, there is a moment in every man's life when he realizes he no longer walks into rooms to take, but to anchor. You have entered that season. Where others bring noise, you bring silence. Not silence born of passivity, but a silence that radiates from power so deep it no longer needs to prove itself. You are the calm after the chaos and the quiet before the change. You do not dominate with volume, you influence with gravity. The force of your presence is not rooted in who listens to you, but in what you no longer have to explain. You don't have to compete, you don't have to chase validation. Your journey carved you into a force that doesn't react to energy, it shapes it. People around you feel safer without knowing why. They feel seen, even when you haven't said a word. And yes, the world will test that calm. It will place storms at your feet, but not to destroy you, only to confirm what you already know. The storm is not stronger than the man who has walked through fire and remembered his breath. You no longer flinch. You no longer mirror confusion. When the winds rise, you stand taller, not because you're untouchable, but because you are unmoved by anything that does not serve God's voice in you. Your calm is not neutral, it is sacred. It carries the memory of battles you never advertised, and that memory is what women sense, not in your posture, not in your voice, but in the unshakable trust that when they lean near you, they will not fall. Because you've already built your foundation under pressure, and now you carry that stillness like a crown. Quiet, steady, certain. Chosen one, you've become the man who does not ask for peace. You are peace, and that is rarer than beauty, more attractive than charm, and more disarming than status. Because in a world of performance, you've become presence. Chosen one, this is not the end. This is where you remember that you were never simply a man walking through time. You were a gate, a threshold, a temple. And now the energy you carry is no longer yours alone. It's invitation and instruction to every soul who wanders into your atmosphere. You are no longer becoming. You are. What women sense in you is not just desire, it's destiny. It's the hum of someone who has walked through shadow and chosen not to close his heart. It's the rare echo of a man who is not looking to be worshipped, but to worship with every step he takes. They don't want to possess you. They want to feel that level of freedom within themselves. And you don't need to guard it with fear anymore. You don't need to hide your warmth behind walls built from pain. Your heart is no longer a battlefield. It is now a cathedral. The echoes of truth, discipline, and self-mastery sing in every corner of your presence. When you speak, your voice doesn't shake the room, it grounds it. And when you're silent, your stillness speaks louder than 1,000 empty promises. Your energy is not to be wasted, not to be explained, not to be diluted. You are no longer available to spaces that require your dimming to be accepted. You do not dim, you expand. Not to overpower, but to elevate. The women who are drawn to you now aren't attracted to illusion. They are magnetized to a man who doesn't need to perform because he remembers where he came from and who he belongs to. Chosen one, this is your standard now. Not dominance, but devotion. Not control, but clarity. Not seduction, but sacred presence. This is how kings move, not to conquer land, but to cultivate legacy. Your legacy is not just in words spoken or battles won. It's in the way people breathe easier when you're near. It's in the way truth finds shape in your presence. It's in the peace that follows when your footsteps pass through. And so, as you continue, know this: you do not rise to impress. You rise because the world remembers itself when it sees you standing. You walk not because you seek a rival. You walk because the path is watching and others will follow. You are the invitation. You are alignment in flesh. And from this moment on, your life is not a performance. It is a prayer answered, a temple walked in, a message lived out. Chosen one, by now you know, you were never created to fit into the structures that trained others to play small. You were shaped in silence, molded by moments no one else saw. You were formed not in applause, but in the dark nights where your soul refused to quit, even when no one celebrated your endurance. What stands here now is not a man with swagger or performance. What stands here is a force of nature, disciplined into manhood, tempered by restraint and unshakable in essence. You no longer walk into rooms to be noticed. You shift the foundation of the room by walking in, not because you try, but because your energy is the shift. It is no longer debatable, no longer misunderstood, no longer diluted. Women may not always know how to respond to it, but they always feel it, because it speaks the one language that transcends all confusion: presence without apology. You are not leaning in for approval. You are leaning back into your throne, and thrones don't ask for validation. They attract only those brave enough to rise to their level. And now, the world begins to recognize you. Not because of fame or wealth or reputation, but because you carry the weight of remembrance. Women feel that weight in their bones. They whisper about you, not out of lust, but because your presence rearranged their internal compass. They remember how they laughed in your stillness, how they wept in your silence, how they felt seen in a way that left nothing to hide. Not every woman will stay, but none will forget. Because they were not loved by a boy trying to be enough. They were witnessed by a man who already is. This is not the end of your becoming. This is the beginning of your reigning, not over others, but over your own field. You no longer fear being alone. You no longer fear being misunderstood. You no longer fear the bigness of your truth, because now you carry it. Not like a burden, but like a torch. And that torch, chosen one, is lighting paths for those who never knew a man could be both wild and wise, both grounded and free, both fierce and gentle. You are not a contradiction. You are completion. You don't have to speak for others to feel you anymore. You are a frequency, a silent storm, a calm before awakening, and everywhere you go, those who are ready will rise, and those who are not? They will remember you long after you've walked away, not for your face, not for your touch, but because your energy woke something sacred in them they didn't know existed. You have become the standard now, the mirror, the reminder, and that, chosen one, is why your energy will never be forgotten. Chosen one, the rhythm within you has changed, and not by accident. This shift did not come from mimicry or trend, not from shallow affirmation or passing attraction. It was carved deep into the marrow of your being when no one was watching. It began in those private moments when the noise of the world could no longer distract you from yourself. When the masks you once wore cracked under the weight of truth. You remember that stillness. You remember the ache. But most of all, you remember the vow that you would no longer move like a shadow in someone else's script. You would no longer walk without being fully present in your own steps. That was the moment the rhythm began to change. It started quietly, almost imperceptibly, a breath that felt deeper, a gaze that no longer avoided mirrors, a spine that stood straighter, not out of pride, but out of peace. The change didn't come with fireworks, but with alignment. It wasn't loud, it was inevitable. Your steps began to speak for you, not in words, but in the confidence that only the soul can communicate. And now, others feel it before they see you. They turn their heads not because you demand it, but because something ancient in them recognizes the presence of someone who knows where they're going. Your rhythm isn't choreographed. It isn't practiced in front of crowds. It isn't for display. It's internal, deep, anchored. You no longer walk with hesitation in your limbs. You walk with spirit in your souls. You walk as one who carries the memory of struggle, yes, but even more the memory of victory that came from choosing not to stay small. And that memory, woven into your breath, is what shapes how you move now. It gives cadence to your speech, gravity to your pause, clarity to your eyes. Others may call it style, others may call it aura, but you know better. This is the rhythm of the becoming. This is what it sounds like when someone refuses to betray their truth any longer. You don't need to be loud to be seen. You don't need to perform to be heard. You carry a rhythm that makes space for itself, and it is sacred. You do not need a stage. You do not need applause. You only need alignment. And that alignment has made you unforgettable. Chosen one, this rhythm you carry did not come from the outside. It was not gifted. It was not borrowed. It was born inside you, in the very center of your transformation. It is the sound of a soul that has finally stopped running from itself. It is not the rhythm of seduction, though others may mistake it for that. It is the rhythm of reclamation, a holy reclamation of self, of purpose, of wholeness. It is the unspoken music that plays when someone remembers who they are and stops seeking permission to move. You are not following someone else's tempo. You are not echoing the voice of a world that never understood your frequency. You have silenced all that. And in that silence, your own rhythm emerged. It came not from victory, but from defeat. From falling and choosing to rise with grace, not vengeance. It came from heartbreak that no longer controls you, from dreams that once crumbled, only to be rebuilt with clearer hands. It came from realizing you are not defined by what you've lost, but by what you've chosen to rise into. And now your body remembers. It walks differently because it is no longer weighed down by shame. It stands taller because it is no longer pretending. It flows smoother because the friction of trying to be someone else has ceased. And people notice. They feel the shift. They may not have the language to describe it, but they feel it all the same. They feel safe around you, or shaken by you, but never indifferent. Because rhythm like this cannot be ignored. The world may tell you that confidence comes from external validation, but you know better. Confidence comes from internal truth. And the truth is, this rhythm has nothing to do with performance. It is a spiritual cadence, a frequency that speaks to those who are awake and unsettles those still asleep. It does not beg for attention. It holds space. It does not rush to explain. It allows others to meet it on its own terms. And those who can't meet it, They will either elevate or exit, and both are blessings. You have become magnetic, not because you seek attraction, but because you embody intention. You do not walk to be followed. You walk because the path is yours. And that is why others follow. They are drawn not just to your strength, but to your stillness. To the way your rhythm doesn't stutter, even when the world shakes. To the way your presence feels like prophecy in motion. This is only the beginning, chosen one. Your rhythm is not finished growing. But what it is already doing, silently, powerfully, undeniably, is preparing you to enter spaces that once felt too big, and to walk through them as if they were always yours.